Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Hadley Hall, and I'm part of Square's account management team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oscar Wimshurst. I work in tax partnerships at Bench Accounting. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic obviously continues to wreak havoc around the globe, causing distress to people's lives and obviously the world economy. And as a result, businesses have to deal with difficult and strenuous, evolving financial, workforce, and operational issues that require you to understand the resources available to you and also how to cope and reach and react swiftly and strategically.
So to help you, Square has teamed up with our partner Bench, who is America's largest professional bookkeeping service for small businesses, to lead you through this week of workshop sessions to help get your finances in order, prepare for reopening, and get financial best practices for small business owners like you.
Yeah, and as we get our conversation started today, I wanted to share that both Square and Bench have a dedicated resource hub with constantly updated resources for businesses with tips and guidance. Now, we'll share this link at the end of the conversation, but we've also listed the full schedule of online workshops at square.com/events. And with that, let's get into today's session. We've got a few hellos coming through in the chat and one bonjour. So thanks everyone for joining so far. That's great. I'll just, hang on, let me just get a hold of these slides. So we're going to cover a couple of things here. We're going to talk about not only staying afloat during COVID-19 and some things you can do in the coming weeks and months as we go through this time now, but also we're going to finish up with a few more general points about some things you can kind of do to future-proof your business, both from a sort of financial and strategic standpoint that will hopefully kind of make you more resilient to any future recessions. But with that, Hadi, I'll kick over to you.
Yeah, so just a little background on Square for anyone who's not familiar. We started as that little white reader that you may recognize from your local coffee shop or retail store that plugs in right to the iPad. But we've grown from there. We haven't stopped growing. We've developed businesses tools to help businesses at everything from marketing tools, reporting, and of course, payment processing.
And we're Bench. So if you've not heard of Bench, we are the largest bookkeeping service for small businesses in the US. And the whole idea of Bench is that we take bookkeeping as much as we can off your hands and make it bookkeeping as well as tax season painless for small businesses. So you get a dedicated remote team to handle your day-to-day bookkeeping, as well as an intuitive app to help you track all your finances. And there's Caitlin, my colleague, staring back at you there. What a nice photo. Now, moving on to the kind of the bulk of the slide. So talking about COVID-19 and a couple of steps and a few steps that you can take in order to kind of, I suppose, best practices for the coming weeks. First thing you want to think about is your insurance coverage. It can be sort of slightly overlooked because everybody has a negative view of insurance companies and what might not be covered and what is. But one thing you should definitely do is double and triple check that insurance coverage, as some small businesses will carry interruption insurance. So you want to make sure you're reviewing your policy and giving your insurance agent a call to see exactly what's covered and what isn't. Now, a lot of people will have kind of heard reports or seen news that things like pandemic insurance might not be covered, but you just don't know until you ask. One thing we do know is that if you don't have insurance coverage, it's probably too late to purchase it now. But once things have stabilized, you'll definitely be wanting to have a look at business insurance for the future, just in case sort of similar situations or other things that you just can't predict arise. Next thing you can do is implement an emergency budget. Now, obviously being a bookkeeping company, this is something that's been kind of all over our agenda for the last few weeks, and we've been kind of talking clients through this as much as possible. But you really want to, I'm going to go straight through to the last point on this slide just first, because it is vital. And at times like this, you know exactly where your finances are. You get your bookkeeping in order, and you really know what the sort of financial health of your business is. Because not only are you going to know sort of how long you can keep going, but also you're going to see exactly where you're spending your money. So you'll be able to see how much you're spending on things like travel and non-essential spending that you can cut out or minimize immediately. You'll be able to have a look at all of your subscriptions, some that might have like slipped through the net and you forgot that you were paying, that you signed up for sort of 3 years ago, and you can immediately cancel anything that you're not using. Any large projects that you're doing as a business that are kind of capital intensive, it's probably a good idea to kind of leave those for now, and you can hopefully put them off for later. Also, if you're paying down debt and you have that as an overhead for the business, definitely worth considering whether or not it's a good idea to just pay that minimum required balance on a monthly basis without sort of getting penalized. And we'll talk a little bit about communicating with lenders in a later slide, but definitely a good idea to conserve cash. And then just to kind of reiterate, bookkeeping through kind of difficult business times is of crucial importance. And obviously at Bench, we're here to help with that piece. This next part about loans, there's a few things to say here, because obviously there's private loans, but then there's also loans and financing options you can get through governments or kind of public bodies. And the big thing right now is relief funding through the CARES Act. And the biggest part of that is the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. I did a similar session such as this yesterday, and we'll have a recording going out soon for Square merchants, which has a load of information about that program. But the kind of key highlights is that this program is not closed. It's been going for a few months, and there is still funding available for small businesses. There's something like over $100 billion worth of funding still available. And also you are eligible to apply for this even if you don't have payroll or employees. A lot of people look at the name and immediately think, right, that's for larger businesses with a number of employees on payroll. But that's not the case. Even if it's just you and you're kind of drawing money from the business to keep going, you can apply for funding through this program. And if you kind of follow the rules of the program and you kind of adhere to the guidelines, you can actually have a huge part of that loan forgiven so you don't have to pay it back. So I've spent a bit of time on that point, but definitely worth checking out the PPP. There's a few other programs as well through the SBA you should be researching. Aside from kind of public loans or sort of government loans that you can apply for, you can also take a more strategic approach to any private lending. So if you've got pre-existing loans at a higher interest rate, as it says here on the fourth point, on March the 15th, the Federal Reserve cut the Fed rate to 0%. So that means it's a great time to go back to your lender, talk about refinancing that loan and lock in a much lower interest rate, which should definitely be helping you out with any repayments. And then it's always worth just having a constant conversation with your bank to take advantage of any opportunities. And as well as your bank, talk to any other non-bank lenders, folks like Square Capital and others that are also great sources of funding for the business. I mentioned this before, but on this slide, we're talking about being proactive in your communication. Obviously, one side of that is dealing with lenders. And one thing that I've certainly learned from this process, and I've seen it time and time again from bench clients, is that lenders and folks out there are actually on your side during this process. This pandemic is happening to everyone, and everyone knows that it's in kind of everyone's long-term best interest to help each other, and that extends to lenders as well. So if you're going to have trouble making payments, definitely reach out and see if the lender can do anything for you in terms of not penalizing you for that. Or if you're going to have trouble paying vendors, let them know as soon as possible. To give you a quick story here, I mean, Bench, we're a subscription business for outsourced bookkeeping. And it may come as no surprise. I mean, we've got 8,000 small business clients. And there has been a ton of those folks who've been kind of following my advice here, and they've been implementing an emergency budget and minimizing their costs where possible. And one of the things is, if I can maybe kind of reach out to Bench and see what they can do. And obviously it's in our interest to keep these clients for the long term, to help them out as much as we can during the pandemic. And so we've been issuing credit to these folks, we've been pausing subscriptions, and I can guarantee that we are not the only vendor to be doing the same thing. So definitely be reaching out to anyone that you need to pay through this time. And as it kind of touches there, many companies and vendors are likely to help and have announced measures. So offering free services. This is like if you're a restaurant and they're going through kind of DoorDash or Uber Eats, these companies are known to be offering free delivery services for restaurants that are still doing delivery. So definitely check things like that. Definitely hold off on shutting off services for missed payments. And you may even find that they waive late fees for individuals and businesses impacted by COVID-19. So communication is massively important. And then alongside those federal government programs that we talked about, things like the PPP, things like the economic injury disaster loans, each state is going to have its own assistance programs you should definitely be checking out. Now, I know Bench has got an amazing resource on our blog where we kind of try and tell you what's available state by state, and it's definitely out there with just a simple Google search. But of course, you can always check with your local governor's office or your Chamber of Commerce for the latest updates. Finally, now this is definitely close to our heart, is that you should be taking the time to talk to your accountant or bookkeeper or tax advisor. And this is for a number of reasons. You will have seen, obviously, that the IRS has announced a 90-day extension on payments. And also, you will have seen that the tax deadline was extended as well to July 15th. Now, obviously, that's coming up. So it's in your best interest to file as soon as possible. You also should be aware that you have until July 15th to pay any taxes owed without interest or penalties. Now, when you're kind of struggling to keep your business afloat and doing whatever you can to pivot and follow all the steps that we're going to talk about today, it's easily done. It's to kind of forget the simple things like, oh, I've got to file my taxes, I've got to pay my tax debt. And that can come back to bite you in the form of penalties and interest. So definitely stay on top of that. But then there's another side to this, which is in the form of relief for the business. Because the CARES Act, not only did it release a bunch of information around things like PPP and EIDL and all the stuff that's caught the headlines, it was a massive bill. And within that was a ton of information on tax relief programs for small businesses. Now, I know that Square's got an amazing blog article on this subject, so does Bench, but there's a number of things in here that you can do in filing your taxes that's going to help give you an immediate refund, which is going to be a kind of lifeline of cash support for your business. To call out a couple of them off the top of my head, one of them is that you can now carry back any business losses. So if you had a loss in 2018 or 2019, you can carry that back 5 years. You can offset it against any gain that you reported in a tax return, let's say in 2016. And if that suddenly means that you're now eligible to receive a tax refund, you'll get that immediately. And that obviously can be a vital source of cash for the business. And your CPA is going to know a ton of other information about that. So definitely get on the phone and set a meeting up with your CPA.
So on the operations side of things, the first point I wanted to talk about is considering how you can evolve. So looking at a lot of the businesses I work with, restaurants in particular, one of the trends that I've seen time and time again is restaurants who are doing almost a complete business pivot, and they're going from a full service sit down experience, and they're going to now selling groceries, they're selling supplies, they're selling prepackaged family meals. And this applies to any type of business. It could be a retail business, it could be a service business. You can sell gift cards, sell subscription products on an e-commerce site, or even consider adding in new offerings. So this could be taking your beauty service and creating a virtual offering for it, creating classes. The biggest thing that I've seen with businesses that Square works with that has enabled them to continue on and continue bringing in revenue is to diversify your offering. So don't have just one channel of income. Offer multiple options, even if it's new, even if it's something that you've never done before. And then again, continue to collect revenue. So there's different ways now that your customers may want to pay. So things like remote payments, buy online and then pick up in store has been huge. With Square's online store offering, you can purchase products, whether it be food for pickup, whether it's retail items. You can make that payment online so that there's no contact, and then you can schedule times where you can then go to pick it up from, as a customer, pick it up from the seller. Other large contactless payment trends that we've seen are social selling. So Instagram is absolutely huge. It's a centralized place where your customers will likely be, that you can provide all of this information for them and link it out to your online site, doing Facebook Live selling, and then even leveraging something like invoices. You may not typically think of a small gift boutique store as a good fit for invoices, but you can leverage something like Facebook Live to highlight all your different products that you have available, and then invoice the customers who decide they'd like to purchase through the Facebook Live chat. And then when we do have those in-person payments that have to be taken, you can think about ways to maintain those same contactless payment options. So something as simple as just a physical barrier, a physical plexiglass shield. We've seen this a lot in things like grocery stores, but just creating a physical barrier can help prevent the spread of anything. Tap payments instead of swiping, so any of those contactless payment methods. And then things like disabling the signature screen, so that if you do need to touch the device during the checkout, you reduce the times to as few as possible by disabling that signature screen. And then finally, making a plan for reopening. So whether you can reopen at this point or not, you can always plan for the future and take stock of your business. Think about all the different areas of your business and how this may impact it. So things like employees, finances, customers, and supply chain. Go through each different section, make a plan for how you're going to change things, continue, or pivot upon reopening.
Thanks, Hadley, and thanks everyone for taking part in these poll questions. I'm really I find it fascinating seeing the answers that are coming through. It's great to see so many people already starting to prepare their taxes. Good job, you guys. And also, it's kind of really interesting to see on the topic of insurance, this whole idea that, one person knows they've got it, but there's a whole bunch, over half the people who answered that poll actually don't know whether they have interruption insurance or not. And that is a common story. Definitely worth triple checking your policy documents on insurance to see whether or not that qualifies, or whether or not you qualify for that. Just before we move on, there's one other thing I just want to touch on, which I should have done when we were talking about relief programs and funding available. I'm not exactly sure of the split of folks that we have on this workshop, but knowing the kind of folks that kind of are Square merchants and Square Capital users anyway, a lot of you guys are going to be sole proprietors or independent contractors or self-employed. And one thing that you should be aware of is actually unemployment benefits now apply to you as well. Typically, folks who are self-employed haven't been able to take advantage of unemployment benefits. But through what's called the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, which was passed as part of the CARES Act, Unemployment has been now extended to self-employed folks, so do check that out. Worth noting as part of that, however, is that if you're eyeing up things like the payroll protection program, they don't mix. So you can't be claiming money from the SBA or from a lender on the PPP and then going and collecting unemployment benefits, because you have to declare that those PPP funds through this kind of local agency that you're collecting that unemployment from. However, as it stands, the PPP is an 8-week program. You get the funds, you have it's supposed to cover you for 8 weeks, and you go through the period of trying to get it forgiven. If business still hasn't picked up by then, there's nothing to stop you taking advantage of unemployment, just, I suppose, to get a bit of an extra injection of income once the PPP is finished. But now we're going to just tie this off with a slightly sort of more broader look into things you can do for your business to sort of navigate a recession, even prepare for one in broader terms. The first thing that I'm certainly going to talk about is understanding where your money is going. There's a little bit of overlap here between what we just talked about with kind of navigating your way through the current COVID-19 situation, how important it is to know where you're spending your money so you know what to stop. This is kind of true across the piece, and it's not something that you should just be doing just now, just because you're in a pandemic. It's a good business practice that you should have in place that's going to really ensure that you have confidence in your business when things do start to take a turn for the worse in a recession. So you need to make sure that you've got up-to-date bookkeeping and monthly financial statements. So what that means is each month you want to know what your profit and loss is, so money coming in, money going out of the business, and you want to have a monthly balance sheet. So you want to know exactly what your sort of equity position is, what your assets and liabilities are, and just to kind of give you that real internal confidence in the financial health of your business. Because a recession is a very emotional time, and the more certainty you can have just through numbers and just from being really organized with your finances is really going to help you. Second point is use a cash flow monitoring tool. This is another great opportunity to plug Bench, because all Bench users through our app get access to our Pulse feature. And this is hooked up directly to your bank accounts, and it gives you a live picture across the different accounts that you use for your business, exactly what your cash position is, whether or not you can meet payroll that month, whether or not you can pay specific vendors, if you're going to have to kind of move a couple of things around. It's incredibly important to know exactly how much cash you have on hand, particularly during a recession. And then this third point, evaluate your subscriptions and recurring expenses. It feels very painful to say this as a subscription company. Obviously, like I said before, we've already had people and a good percentage of our clients where we've had to kind of look after them through the pandemic and pause a subscription, offer credits. I can also tell the story that my girlfriend, we're all working from home at the moment. I know that Hadley's in the same situation, but I work in the same room often as my girlfriend, who works for another subscription business. And I hear her all the time offering credit to her customers for 1, 2, 3 months. And knowing exactly what your subscriptions are and your regular monthly payments is a really important part of bookkeeping. And having that all broken out for you is going to really help through recessions.
I'll add into that really quickly on the Square side of things. Many products that Square has, and I'm sure this again is applicable with other vendors that you may be using, but we have a paid version of products, and we also have a free kind of scaled down version of products. And some of our products we've made free to deal with the COVID pandemic right now. So things like our online store for order ahead, but other tools will have free options forever. So things like online store has a free option, marketing, just to name a few. And so looking and diving into the products that you're currently using, maybe you could scale back and use a free version, or maybe there's other free tools available to you that you're not even aware of.
Thanks, Hadley. Awesome point. Next slide here is on doing more with your assets. Now, this is getting kind of slightly jargony, and I do apologize, but we'll kind of run through this. There's some great tips here. The first is, so got excess inventory. So if you've got stock that is that's lying around, it's essentially just waiting to be turned into cash. It's assets. It doesn't matter. They may be kind of wasting assets that kind of, I don't know if it's kind of food or drink that you may have a limited shelf life, but even if it's kind of stuff that doesn't fall into that category, it is assets that's waiting to kind of offer a cash injection to your business. So maybe it's time to just clear that out. If you've got promotions that you can offer that you can just get stock off your books, then maybe that's a great thing to think about. As well, if you've got cash on hand, a recession is an amazing time to reinvest into your business and actually do things during this time that nobody else is going to be doing, when everybody else is kind of running around, kind of trying to find their tail, and trying to figure out exactly how they're going to get through the next few months. If you've got cash on hand, you can start thinking of different ways you can reinvest into your business, and you can play the long game and really think, how am I going to re-emerge from this with a stronger, healthier business, maybe with a new business line, with a new direction, or improve facilities, who knows. Clients behind on payments. Now, there's some you can definitely take a proactive approach here. If it's helping them out and kind of rescheduling the payment schedule, finding different ways to accept payment, it's definitely time to get creative about collecting that cash from your clients. And then this last point is a cracking idea. If you've got a nice office or a warehouse space, and let's say everybody's working from home at the moment, you've got a different way to use it, consider renting it out. We're going to talk about this as well. I know Hadley's got some she's already talked about ways that you can pivot your business, but this kind of definitely falls into that category. If you've got excess space, if you've got any sort of asset that has some sort of alternative use, think about how you can get that generating cash for your business. This next slide about offloading your high interest debt. Now, again, this is slightly financial and technical, but if you have a number of different options of financing your business through debt, whether it's through credit cards or loans or otherwise, when you enter into a recession and times are tough and these debts start to mount on top of you, the tried and tested technique is to look at your debt obligations that carry the highest level of interest and pay those off first. Because if you miss any of those payments and interest starts to accrue, if it's accruing at a higher rate, that is going to become a stifling overhead, and it's going to seriously damage your cash flow and hurt your business. So the more you can do to think strategically about the way you're paying off debt and start from the highest interest down to the lowest interest, that's going to be a great way to navigate through tougher times. And then take the long view, and you can certainly do this with your finances and with your bookkeeping. Take a couple of weeks to breathe, assess the situation. Obviously, it's a good idea to tighten the purse strings, to get all your bookkeeping in order, to really look at where you're spending your money. But don't make any hasty decisions that you can afford to just take a couple of weeks to think about. It may give things the chance to kind of settle down, the dust to settle. You'll be able to get a much better picture of your forecasting of how long you can kind of go before you need to make any really drastic changes. And it means that you're not, exactly as it says here, you're not making your decisions motivated by fear. You're taking a strategic approach. You're thinking for the long term. You're thinking, right, this pandemic, this recession won't last. What hopefully will last is my business, and I can make decisions now that are going to affect that.
And just to jump on there, I think too, while the recession won't last, I think some of the changes in the way that businesses and customers experience commerce may slightly. So thinking about how, a lot of the pivots that we're seeing now, the changes that we're seeing businesses do, they may be around for long after the pandemic has ended. So thinking about ways that you can incorporate the changes that you're making now into your business plan for the long term. There's a lot of incredibly innovative, creative things that businesses are doing right now, and things that can really serve as a long-term benefit. Many businesses who didn't have an e-commerce presence leading up to the pandemic have been forced to realize that that's an area of their business that they need to invest more in, and they need to offer as a secondary option for their customers, aside from that in-person experience that they've always had. And in the long term, that will only help their business. That will only help their business if you have that as a secondary option to have both that in-person and online experience.
So true. It's actually amazing, just from my own personal experience of kind of seeing some of the ways that kind of companies that I interact with have completely changed over the last few weeks. It'd be crazy for them to to stop doing it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think I referenced this a little bit earlier, but I work with a couple full service restaurants that, I mean, full service right now, it's hard. It can't really be done with the restrictions in place with limiting the number of people. And so people being so creative, creating things like family meal kits that you can get and watch a live Instagram cooking class on Friday night together with your family, and then doing that cooking class with the lead chef. Creating grocery stores where people can go and then buy the same food that the restaurant would normally serve you, but buying those groceries directly from their locally sourced farm. On the retail side of things, again, I think the biggest trend that I've seen with the businesses that I work with on the retail side is how important social media is. Social media, Instagram, it's such a great way to meet your clients and your customers where they're at, where they are every day, and just post those updates. Let them know, hey, we haven't stopped thinking about you. We're working every day to get our services back to you, to get you the options, the opportunities to come back in and see us again. And then upon the time when you can reopen, letting them know this is our plan for reopening, this is how you can come in, and this is how we're doing it safely, so that your customers continue to feel safe when they're visiting you on site. So just again, to kind of reiterate here, we've talked about a couple of these points, but I think these are really the big take homes from everything that we've discussed today. So opening new lines of business. So diversify your offerings. Shift to delivery. If you've never done delivery before, look into it, whether it's a first-party solution where it's a business-powered delivery, or it's using a third-party courier service. There are a number of different ways that you can offer delivery. It may just depend on whether you have the resources available to do it first-party delivery, or if you want to leverage those app marketplaces. Buy online, pick up in store. This is going to be the best way to reduce or to offer contactless payment, is just to do that online transaction. Things like subscription. It could be a food product, it could be a service, it could be a retail product. One of the new features that Square just released a couple weeks ago is our Square online checkout, which has the ability to do a kind of a lightweight subscription. Basically, just send a link to your customers, they can pay it, and it'll be a recurring payment. So things like services, that'll be really great for if you have someone who comes in on a kind of a monthly cadence. New products or lines of services. I think out of all the the pandemic that's happening right now, all the hardships, there's so much innovation, and there's people being creative and actually creating new offerings. So continuing again to diversify your offerings or services.
I'll just tack in there with a couple of bench examples. I went kind of looking through the archives and kind of talking to some of the bookkeepers and trying to find some of the creative things that our clients have done. And there's a couple of ones here. So we've got a client that is a small business that manufactures trumpet cases. And I've looked on the website, it's brilliant. They have sort of like leather trumpet case or crocodile skin, and it sounds pretty bad, but hopefully it's fake. But they make these amazing musical instruments cases. They've completely pivoted to make non-medical masks for folks who need them during the pandemic. Then also we have another client that makes pinball machines and all the modifications for those sort of arcade games. And they're now using that sort of, I suppose, the plastic surfacing from those pinball machines. Then what they're pivoting to create face shields for hospitals. So it's pretty amazing what small businesses do. I mean, personally, I'm always amazed anyway at some of the incredible businesses that people can come up with, and anyway and people that can pivot with as well. And my kind of, I suppose, one of my parting thoughts before we go into Q&A is in spite of everything, it's actually an amazing time to be a small business and to be a local business. I speak from my own personal experience and also my kind of family's experience is that when everybody's kind of been at home and forced to kind of slow down a bit with their life, everybody's thinking a lot more locally about kind of how they're kind of living their life. And a great example is that my sister way back home in the UK, she does local veg boxes through a tiny business and she has never been busier. So if you're kind of a small business operating locally in a small town or whatever, it's a great time to stay connected with your community, keep staying open, find different ways of serving people. And you'll get people like me who every Friday night want to support local business and order a takeaway. So it's definitely not all bad. But I think we do have, that is the kind of all the slide material that we prepared. We've got a few minutes left for Q&A. I think we have Sydney on standby who's been curating some of the questions coming through. We cannot hear you. Tech issues. While Sydney is figuring out her microphone, I'm going to have a look through the chat here and just have a look some of the questions that came through. We got a question just about the deck that we put together today, and I'm sure that that's going to be sent around afterwards to everyone who was on. So I'm sure you're going to have a copy of all the material here. There's another question here, and Angelia asks about the PPP and it being 1%. And I'm not sure if she's being a very canny business person here anyway, but asking, right, if I've got a PPP loan at 1% for 2 years, and the Federal Reserve have just dropped interest rates to 0%, can I renegotiate my PPP loan? And no is the answer. Unfortunately not. I wish you could. This is obviously not through a lending institution, even though they'll be servicing your loan. These funds are coming directly from the Treasury, from the SBA. And so it's unfortunately not possible to go to your lender and renegotiate on this particular loan. However, at a 1% loan being repaid over 2 years, it's going to be one of the lowest kind of interest rate sources of funding out there. You do have to remember that there are strict guidelines with a sort of governing how you use these funds. You can't sort of go around using them for sort of expenses that aren't kind of clearly laid out as part of the guidelines, because unfortunately you do open yourself up to fraud through that. But you know, even if you don't get it all forgiven and you go through the PPP, it's a very low interest rate. Sheila also asked, can we pay off our Square Capital loan from our EIDL loans? The EIDL is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. It is a lot broader than the PPP, but it is designed to cover working capital costs. And so, you know, things that you can't pay for anymore as a result of the pandemic. Now, whether or not that extends to Square Capital loans, I do not know that answer for sure on here. But what I can tell you is that Bench are offering free consultations for Square merchants. All the details for how to kind of get one of those consultations with one of our sort of client relief team who are well versed in all these relief programs, you'll be able to find that through the events page that's been set up for this, and we'll send the link round after this. Adley, there's another Bench question here. I do apologize, but no,
it's okay.
We got a question here asking if Bench is available for Canadians or only US, and unfortunately, we only work with United States clients at the moment. If the situation never does change, we'll be sure to be issuing press releases all over the place. So do stay tuned. At the moment, it's only American clients. And yeah, here Tamar asks, how do we contact Bench to have a consultation? That is on, I don't know the exact link. Hopefully we can share the link of where you can find how to register for Bench consultation. We'll send it around to everyone who's been on this webinar. and it is on the events page of SquareUp, so squareup.com/events. You'll see a link to this kind of week worth of material, and you'll be able to find how to sign up for a bench consultation there. Jeremy asks, can EIDL loans be used for business expansion? This isn't in the, it's not in the spirit of the EIDL. I know a lot more about the PPP than I do the EIDL, but if I think about the reasons for the relief programs, they are there in order to provide financial assistance for people who've been negatively impacted by economic disasters and other disasters, if you're talking about the EIDL. So it's for folks who have financial obligations that they need to meet, overheads, payroll, and other sort of working capital requirements that they need additional funding in order just to meet those. In my opinion, the spirit of the EIDL is not to kind of just give you a low interest rate loan in order to just expand your business. So whilst I'm sure there are people out there getting loans who think that they might do that, I'm not sure it's certainly best practice. And I see Tamar got the link from Kelsey there, which is great. So if anyone else can see that in the chat there, Kelsey has very helpfully put up the Calendly link, which is going to take you through to the calendar for the team at Bench. I believe you've got some slots in between June the 3rd and June the 5th to kind of book one-on-one free consultations with an expert at Bench. Oh, and big shout out for Square, which is awesome there. Square client, love Square, true blessing for the business. Wow, awesome stuff.
Love that. Warms my heart.
Oh wow, we've got loads. This is turning into a Square love fest, which is fine. Jeremy's asked, will Square Capital be offering capital opportunities with lower interest rates? Hadley, I don't know if you've got any insight there, but I do not know the answer to that question, but I'm sure we will. I'm sure it's kind of be on the Square website if there were.
Yeah, I don't have any insight into that. I would refer you to check the Square website or your dashboard for more information on that one.
And then in the hidden within the deluge of good wishes for Square, there's another question here, which is just any deals being offered by Bench. And so, yes, so for Square merchants, we do have an offer for Bench. So you get 20% off your first 6 months of bookkeeping. And that's absolutely open to all Square merchants that kind of sign up through Bench. So do mention that as part of your free consultation. If you also want to discuss, funding, that's fine. If you want to discuss bookkeeping and signing up with Bench, we definitely have an introductory offer for you. I think that is everything just in terms of questions. I'll give anyone kind of, whilst I'm rambling on here, I'll give you kind of 15 seconds to stick any last questions. We've got loads more loving Squares, which is just awesome. Oh, we got a question. Can Bench be easily integrated with Square? So we do it with another bookkeeping app, and it's a nightmare. So what I can do, I can speak to that from a bookkeeping standpoint. And yes, we integrate with Bench, and we integrate with Square. And so from a bookkeeping point of view, it's so easy. So we get a third-party login to your sort of Square merchant report. Once a month, the bookkeepers will log into the Square account. They'll pull all the information and start using that to help reconciling the books. It's super easy. It doesn't require any effort from kind of a merchant to kind of send that report to us, unless, tap on wood, there's no issue with that 3PL connection. And then Sheila just asked, how much is it monthly for small businesses? So if you go to the Bench website, we're very open with our pricing. So it's www.bench.co. And then there's a big button at the top which says pricing. But prices for small businesses start at just $139 a month. And that's for your own team of bookkeepers to completely, as much as possible, take bookkeeping completely off your hands and free up your time for the rest of your business. With that killer plug, I think we've come to the end. We're coming to the end of our 45 minutes. Brian asked a question just about website design, which I'm afraid I am not qualified to answer. But thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. If you do have any questions that we didn't get to, and if there's anything to do with Bench, hopefully they'll either be passed on to me, or do sign up for a free consultation, and all your questions will be answered by one of the bookkeeping team here at Bench. But for that, thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you found it really helpful. Hadley, I feel like I'm the host now, but I'm definitely not. Hadley, thanks to everything as well.
Yeah, thanks, Oscar, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. Just to address the couple questions on Square, check out our support website. I know there's some information on Wix and the other couple questions that came in there right at the end. So thanks again, everyone.
Bye-bye.